Hey guys, and welcome to today's video. And in today's video, we are talking about this wee little beastie, which is the Razer Ripsaw, which is basically a capture card if you're unsure. But I'm sure if you're here for this video, you at least have an inkling of what this is. I'm just going to talk about my first impressions about it and just some of the little teething issues I've had and the reasons why you might want to consider something like this versus some of the other streaming capture cards that are on the market at the moment. So let's just head straight in, shall we? Now, I was going to do an unboxing of this, but somebody at Amazon beat me to it, and I ordered it, it arrived, and it had been unsealed and everything, so kind of took the magic away, and I wanted to find out if it was actually working before I got into it. But let's kick off. What is the Razer Ripsaw? And the first thing I noticed about this is just how tiny and small and compact it is. I don't know why, but I was expecting something, I don't know, almost Mac Mini-esque, just a lot larger, but this is a really small, slim, and very light little form factor capture card. So, you know, if you're somebody who's going to be using this on the go, if you're somebody who's been playing with a Nintendo Switch or something like that, straight away, this has quite a decent advantage over some of the kind of bulkier capture cards or the more cheap ones. Even though this is like a plastic enclosure and everything, it feels pretty solid and really well made. So first question on the agenda, why did we go with the Razer Ripsaw versus things like the Elgato or any of the other competitors on the market? Because Razer hasn't necessarily been notoriously well known for being like a capture card place to go. And honestly, up until recently, this wouldn't have even been on our agenda, but it's currently available for £95 brand new. And you can pick that up on eBay, you can pick it on Amazon as well. So at £95, it really blows away anything else that competes in that price bracket. Now, the Razer Ripsaw offers a number of decent little features on there that are definitely worthwhile considering. And the first one is it's available to stream and capture your footage at 1080p 60 frames per second, which might not blow some of the world away with your 4K footage that some of your consoles are able to output, but it's certainly good enough for all of your streaming needs, which is a pretty big win. But the thing that sets it apart from other capture cards and other streaming cards in this price bracket is the ability to pass through up to 4K. So if you are on a latest generation console or if you have a really powerful PC or something like that, you'll be able to stream and capture at 1080, but you'll still see your game in all of its glory in 4K 60 frames per second, which is a really big win. I'm somebody who's got a 1440p monitor, and I definitely don't like to see my games get degraded when I'm doing streaming, so I've always ended up sticking with just one machine to try and do it, and that machine's starting to show its age. So having the ability to be able to pass through on this and still see my game exactly the same as I saw it previously, but be able to do capturing and offload all of the rendering and everything else onto another machine is a massive win. Over the past sort of month or so when we've been researching these capture cards, they've always been around about 160 to 200 pounds to be able to get that sort of feature. But this at the moment at 95 pounds, it just does all of that we need, which is absolutely awesome. So if you're the kind of person who likes to game at above 1080p, so up to 4K with all your different consoles, then this might be worthwhile considering because you don't have to spend an arm and a leg to be able to get it, and it does it really, really well. There's also different options on here as well, so if you have a high refresh rate monitor, you'll be able to use this to extend your monitor using OBS and capture on another device. So you'll still be able to game in all of your frames per second glory on one machine and be able to capture it in 1080p 60 frames per second on a different one, so that's not going to get hindered as well. So if you're a high refresh rate gamer, you don't have to worry about dropping those frames to be able to capture your footage, which is another big win. So in reality, it's an awesome value proposition. It comes in at a really, really reasonable price, and it has some fantastic features on there that you normally have to pay quite a lot more for. Some of the other little advantages on here, so on the front of the machine here, you have your microphone input and you also have your headphone jack as well. Now, one thing I was really worried about, and it was just really puzzling me because I couldn't find a concrete answer when I was waiting for this to arrive, is if I'm gaming on my gaming PC, for example, and I'm offloading all the footage onto my MacBook that's then going to do my stream and everything, but I'm doing some kind of co-op game with someone like Liam, for example, where on earth do I have Discord? Do I have it on my gaming PC or do I have it on my MacBook, and how does that work? And obviously the different ways it went through in my head just didn't make sense. Now the beauty of this is it will do audio both ways. So it takes the audio from my PC, passes it through to here, and puts it out through the earphones. So that way any headset I've got plugged into this, I'm hearing exactly what's happening on my PC, which is pretty fantastic. But it also does it the other way as well. So if I have Discord, for example, open on my MacBook, which my microphone's also plugged into, it's then passing it back down this way. So that way my audio is coming from my MacBook through to this and back out to me. And also at the same time, the audio is coming from my PC through to this and back out to me. So it combines both of those in the middle, which just makes things so simple. There's no messing around trying to think, well, do I get plugged into that or that? just plug it all straight into here and it does the rest for you. Now speaking of ports, on the back you have two HDMI ports, so one is HDMI in and one is HDMI out, and the other one is the Type-C port, and you get a really lovely Type-C braided cable in the box. So it's Type-C through to USB-A. Would have been nice to have Type-C to Type-C just for us MacBook users, but who's counting? It's 95 quid at the end of the day. It's still a good enough proposition. It's a really nice braided cable and it plugs directly into whatever device you're going to be streaming out to be able to capture the footage. Now there are a couple of things to mention that are kind of niggling quality of life issues. And the first one is that if this isn't plugged into another device like my Mac through the USB Type-C, regardless if I have my HDMI in and HDMI out, it doesn't work, you just lose your display. So it always has to be plugged into another device. So it's not that much of an issue if you have this popped underneath your desk or underneath your monitor or wherever it's getting plugged into. You literally take your HDMI and just put it straight into it. But it does require a bit more fiddling, so just worth noting if that's going to bother you. The other thing to note as well is that although you don't necessarily need to use Razer Synapse, which is Razer's software for this, you kind of end up in some odd predicaments where you will need to. And the first one is that when I first set this up, the audio coming out of this headphone slot was incredibly quiet. Like everything felt like a whisper. And at first I thought my headphones were faulty, and then I thought this was faulty. But then I tried to install Razer Synapse onto my MacBook because obviously this was getting plugged directly into that. Now, Razer Synapse on the MacBook doesn't work with this. It just didn't detect it. And it might have been down to my machine. It might have been some other niggling little issue that's just related to me. But it didn't work, so I couldn't do anything with it. So what I had to do, the workaround, is I just plugged it into my PC, installed Razer Synapse, and then you get all the volume options for this. And they were all set pretty low, so it's worthwhile noting that if you're getting relatively low audio on this, all you need to do is install Razer Synapse on a Windows-based PC, and then you can go into that and you'll be able to change all the volume levels, and now basically works perfectly. But it's definitely one to note. Now, this could be especially frustrating if you are primarily a Mac user and you are wanting to stream footage from like a console, so if you have a Nintendo Switch or a PlayStation or an Xbox, and you don't have any Windows-based PCs in the house, because then suddenly you can't change things like the audio levels. Would have been nice to maybe have a dial on here, or for Razer to pull a finger out and actually update Razer Synapse for Mac, but who knows? But definitely one worthwhile noting just in case you're that kind of player. And the last one, and it's not actually the massive issue because it has this sort of rubber grip on the bottom, but I mentioned at the beginning, it is light, it's very small, and I guess it's relatively portable. But when I have both of the HDMIs plugged in, it tends to raise up quite a lot, so you have to make sure your HDMI cables get really pulled low because, like I said, it's light, it's going to get knocked about quite a lot. So just worthwhile noting, if it's kind of in an odd place, it might end up kind of going up at a bit of an angle because you've got all three cables kind of just pulling it this way and that. It would have been nicer if it was just a little bit heavier, so that way you didn't have to worry too much about it. Apart from those things, my impressions so far of this thing have been exceptionally good. And like I said at the start, for £95, it's a really good value proposition. Normally you're paying a lot more, starting from about £160 up to £200 to get anything with this sort of feature set. So I'm really impressed with what we've got, and it works pretty well. There's a couple of niggling little issues there, but they're easily resolved once you know where to look. And if you want us to do a setup guide on how we do things like the second monitor on this, so that way you don't have to sacrifice your 160 Hz gaming or your 4K gaming if you're on a monitor that's not compatible, we can do that as well, and we will throw together a quick nifty little user guide. Obviously, getting hold of anything gaming related at the moment is pretty difficult because stocks are just low right across the board, but if you are in the market for something like this, it's definitely worthwhile looking at. If you have a decent value proposition on a capture card, well, the Razer Ripsaw pretty much does everything you're going to need, so I'd say look no further. This isn't a full review yet, we'll have that coming later, but actually really impressed with this, so well done Razer. Hope you've enjoyed that video, and if you have, make sure you hit the subscribe button because it really helps the channel to grow. And if there's anything you'd like us to do a deep dive on for this, how the footage looks or anything like that, let us know in the comments. In the meantime, stay safe and we'll be back in the future with some more awesome content. Bye!